All right, and we're live. This is RPG with R&D, and this week we've got our guest, the legendary Jeff Grubb of TSR and WotC fame, not to mention Guild Wars 2 and whatever mystery project he is doing now with some company we shouldn't talk about. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing fine. It's really happy to be here.
Good. It's great to have you. Robert, how you doing?
Good. It's been a day. Glad the day's here and have a good conversation instead. And nice to meet Jeff, first time really. So been online, but
Yep.
now it's a little bit even, more.
Well,
Our lives are online nowadays, so
that's pretty much true. I actually, Jeff, first time I met you was actually at WotC, because I worked there in customer service the same time you were there, but I tried not to be too much of a nuisance.
Were we in the old building at that point? Or the one with the mana pool?
It was before the Flash Cube.
Yes.
Yes.
And for those listening, those are two separate building complexes that are across the street from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So the one with the mana pool was 4 buildings around a big central pool, the mana pool. And across the street are 2 buildings called the Landmark Center. And they're in the current Wizards of the Coast is based there. And they look like old Instamatic Flash Cubes.
Yep. So, yeah, I pretty much sat in customer service and was freelancing while trying not to be too much of a pain in his neck while I was there. So anyway, that's where I met you, and then I think the next time I saw you was at a convention. I didn't have a ride back to my hotel room, and so you gave me one. So
I have no memory of that.
I figured you probably
got home.
I figured you probably wouldn't, and it's been about 10 years since that happened, but thank you.
I think for me, Jeff was one of the friendings I had on Facebook. So there's a handful of various gaming authors and whatnot that friended me all around a time when I was, we'll say, excessively snarky to certain people. Like, I would just mouth off at just the right time, and then suddenly there'd be that's how Richard Byers, that's how I met him, was mouthing off to someone. Next thing I know, friend request. I'm like, I can't say no. like we don't really know each other, but sure.
I tend to not send out friend requests, but I do respond to them. But I usually, check the friends list, and basically I can tell from what sphere they're coming. Okay, this is someone who's basically talking to a lot of computer game designers, and this is one who's talking to a lot of Star Wars authors, and this is one that's talking to a whole lot of old D&D groups. I see Tim Kask and Jim Ward on their list. So
I think my big connection coming into you initially was through both the late Mike MacArthur and Wolfgang and Company from there.
Oh,
because,
yeah. So, I'm still doing stuff for Wolf.
I'm a lot like you. I actually don't really send out Facebook requests too often. Every once in a while I do. But for the most part, I let people come to me, and then I, like you, I kind of check and see where they're coming from and that sort of thing, and make a decision based on that. But anyway, so you've announced something recently.
I've announced something recently. Yes, I have.
Tell us about that.
Are we talking about Everyday Heroes?
We're talking about Everyday Heroes.
All right. Actually, I put this on my Facebook, so, we just sent out the first press release and got a lot of good response to it. It's called Everyday Heroes, and what we're looking at is taking the framework of what we did 20 years ago. It's 20 years old now, of D20 Modern, which was a modern age D&D D20 thing. Used the D20 rule set, basically, and then took it out of fantasy Middle Ages and applied it to a modern age in various, subgenres. We could do that. And what we were looking for was a system that was versatile enough to be able to handle Buffy the Vampire Slayer or X-Files or, basically different types of modern worlds. And now with Everyday Heroes Evil Genius Games is basically taking those concepts, taking that foundation, and then bringing it to 5th edition, because the game design has evolved over time. We have, we're doing new things, we're doing interesting things. What happens when we come back to that subject and that foundation and build anew? Now, I'm not a designer on the project. I'm not doing, the day-to-day material. I'm acting as a design consultant, which is to say I stand behind them and make ticking noises whenever they do something. Okay, that's going to be interesting. The designers, Chris and Sig Trent, who's done some stuff like Book of Feats and the like. Chris comes out of the DM's guild, where he's done some interesting stuff, and they're the primary designers, and they're laying down a lot of good work. And that's about all I really should say at this point.
That makes sense.
Yes. Okay, let me go a little further. Our producer on the operation is Stan Brown. Stan !
Yes.
Stan Bang. And he's helping out with basically getting us through the various hoops, because he's incredibly experienced. He would be a good subject. He's basically a designer, a cartoonist, an author, and he's got a raconteur. He's got stories.
I'm hoping to get Stan on the show too.
I'll put in a good word for you.
Yeah, I think probably a pretty good chance of that happening. So today is Valentine's Day, and my wife has some questions that she would like me to ask you. How was it? So we just went over this before we got started here. You and your wife actually wrote 6 novels together.
Yes, we did, and we're still married.
How did that go? How did the collaboration work?
The collaboration worked. It was very interesting in the fact that when we were getting the Forgotten Realms started, the first novel was by Doug Niles. The second novel was by Bob Salvatore, Crystal Shard. The third novel was by Ed, and basically one of the reasons it was the third novel is that Ed and I were working on the Gray Box together, so we had to get the game product out before we started thinking about doing stories. And I was going to do the fourth. And on a trip to Milwaukee from Lake Geneva, it was a Friday. We, in those days, we would drive up to Milwaukee to the Turning Page comic book shop, buy comics, then go to a Chi-Chi's, table for two, good light source, and read comics and eat Mexican food. And on the way up, I started telling her what about the story I wanted to tell was. And by the time I got to Milwaukee, one of the characters had changed genders, and I had a co-writer. So Kate and I started working together. We had I'm basically do the very detailed initial outline, and we hammer it out. And I would do the first draft, which is basically get it onto the page. And Catherine would do a lot of review and revision. And then as we moved through the process, she took over more and more of the rewrites and more of the basically shaping it into the form you see it. And the joke. One thing we did when we were working on plot, but the plot was initially, we would go to new restaurants. So if we got into a big fight over some plot point, we would just never go back again. And a lot of wait staff is, we're talking about, what sword moves we need to make and what kind of wounds that can be affected, so we were getting a little bit of, like people kept cruising past our table to make sure that, we weren't plotting some horrible mayhem. And our friends at parties would know that at any moment plot would break out. And we'd be at a party and we'd be talking, making small talk. And then Kate would say, in chapter 5, we have something we can really do here. And everybody would back away because the piano would stop. Everybody would look at us as we start to discuss plot. It's like the Old West.
Well, yeah, I got to say I can kind of identify with some of that because I started this series, and the idea behind the series originally was to take a character that I had come up with in high school, who's originally based in Forgotten Realms, and I have since moved him and his buddy off into a different world, a world of my making. Excellent. And so my wife and I wrote the first one pretty much by myself, and then the next one, my wife and I were basically out on the deck having a wine night, and we were discussing the plot and everything. And next thing you know, I've got a co-author.
Amazing how that works out.
And it pretty much, we discuss plot, and then I pretty much write it, and then I send it over to her, and she finds all my mistakes and corrects them. So it sounds like we have kind of a similar working relationship.
I refer to it as translating it into English. So yes.
Of course, our project is on hiatus right now because I'm kind of I have a lot of freelance work that I'm doing at the moment, so I don't really have time to get back to that. But we will be doing that soon. And she keeps yelling at me about it.
My lovely bride has currently moved on to doing tax preparation. So she's in tax hell right now. So as far as digging up stuff for her clients.
Have you talked about doing any other novels together?
It pops up every so often. I mean, the opportunity is currently not there. But if anyone came to us and say, well, we just happen to have this big bag of money with your names on it. We actually have a couple ideas that we'd like to, use to continue the concept. And we'll see what happens. But at the moment, there is no active plot that we are doing for the future.
Yeah, understandable. Life kind of takes you in different directions.
My life is busy enough as it stands.
Yeah, my partner and I, we drive a lot. Like it's almost weird. Like the moment I got a very fuel economic car, I suddenly started to go back to the fact that I could just get in a car and stay there for hours. And then I met her, and one of the first things we did is we went through like a 3-hour drive together. I think that's a nice crash test. Well, not crash test, bad word, but
bad phrase there.
But a nice way to make to test out your ability to be around each other for a while. And now we just, whenever we get a chance, we usually go for 2-3 hour car trips, just all over the place, and talk about stuff, talk about gaming, or in some cases, just she refers to liking my monologues, where sometimes I start going off about something and.
My lovely bride does listen to, my various interviews and, gives me notes afterwards.
Yeah, very good.
I shouldn't say, I shouldn't say basically.
Better filler words.
We were talking earlier about some of the stuff that you've worked on over the years, and I think the first time I saw your name in print was Manual of the Planes.
Yes.
At what point did you join TSR, and how did that come about?
Oh, wow. I believe I joined the summer of, let me look here, 82, I believe.
So 2 years before I even started playing.
I know. I'm I have moved from I played your games to my parents have played your games to we were cleaning out Grammy's attic and we found something with your name on it. Yes, worked on Manual of the Planes. We had a whole bunch of I had done some tournament modules for Gen Con, and that was my entry into TSR. And one thing that was on the agenda was to do a planar book. And I mentioned this in the introduction. There had been a lot of material done on the Outer Planes, but it's been a piece over here, a piece over here, a piece over there. And putting it all together and synthesizing it into a complete package is the thing I'm particularly proud of for the original Manual of the Planes. And I'm a civil engineer by training. And for that, I went to Purdue University. That's how I got involved in D&D. So those schematics that show the arrangements of all the planes, that comes out of templates engineering templates that I basically were drawing those little things and turning them over to real artists. So they're very close to the sort of approach that I was taking at the time. So that has a lot going on for it.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. So basically, you had written a number of adventures for tournaments, and then did you just hand them a resume one day, or did they kind of say, hey, Jeff, you want to join us, or how did this come about?
I got in. I started playing D&D at Purdue University, and because we're in West Lafayette, Indiana, and the convention was up in first Kenosha when I started, and then Milwaukee is. Sorry, I lost my train for a moment. Kenosha, Milwaukee, and we started running the tournaments. We started basically joining. Bob Blake was in charge of the D&D Open. This was before the RPGA got up and running, and that was the big convention adventure. And after one adventure, one of my friends mouthed off within earshot of Bob Blake saying, yeah, that wasn't very good. We could design better than that. And Bob spun on his heels and said, congratulations, you've just volunteered to write next year's Gen Con Open. And at the time, I was an engineer. I was working in an air pollution company. We had some financial troubles, and they laid off about a third of the company, including me. So I had the time. And I started, corralling the whole group as far as organizing. And it was me, a guy named Frank Dickus, a guy named Jeff Lieben, and Leonard Lakofka. And he was, he was the wild card. He was the established name. He was the cool guy who basically knew what he was doing. And we delivered it, play tested in February for an August release. So we delivered it early. We had play tested early because had time. And on the strength of that, I threw my resume onto TSR, and it would every Monday I would call TSR and the front, and how's it going? How's it, have you got the resume? Has anybody talked to you about it? That sort of thing. And at one point I said, I'm going to be in the area, for a wedding. Can I drop in? And when I meant in the area, I meant Indiana. Okay, so it drove up from Indiana all the way up to, and basically sat for an interview, and they called me, and I got the job as a result. So that's sort of one of those things where I did not lean too heavily, I hope. But at that time they were expanding out their pool of designers, and we had a lot of great designers who started in that period. Doug Niles, Bruce Nesmith, Tracy Hickman, and we were in the old Hotel Claire, which was in downtown Lake Geneva, which had two main stoplights at that time. The Hotel Claire had been a turn of the century hotel, and it had seen better days. When they renovated it, they probably spent more money to renovate it than it would to basically tear the whole thing down and rebuild an exact duplicate. And so we couldn't they would drop pencils on the floor to see which way they rolled. We couldn't have meetings in one room for fear of the building falling over. We had one editor who was tired of having to walk out of his office, through the hall, and into the office next door to talk to somebody. So he bashed a hole in the wall to create his own personal private area.
Wow.
And we had various holes in the ceiling where people had fallen through. So it was very much a this is the three guys in the garage that we weren't in the original Dungeon Hobby Shop, as they say now, which is now another hobby shop.
Right.
But it was basically the first time, and it was only about 6 months before the new building, which was out near Sheridan Springs Road, that was ready, and we moved into that. But it was very, very much that we're putting the band together. Here we go.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of snuck in the back door with WotC. Because I was already in the area, and I was actually selling computers at Future Shop when I met Jim Butler right after TSR had moved in. Sold him computer. That computer didn't actually work out very well, so we ended up having to exchange it. But he kind of got me my start in the industry. But for WotC, I really wanted in. So I ended up, and back then there were the WotC stores in all the malls. And I was living down by Puyallup, so I go into the Puyallup store, and I'm talking to one of the guys there, and I'm like, is there a back door into WotC? And he's like, what do you mean? I mean, I want to work in the office. He goes, "Oh, well, you should talk to this staffing company that they use a lot." I can do that. And within about 3 months, I was there, and yeah.
And often, as you know, as difficult it is, because coming in as a contract worker or coming in through a staffing operation, that's often a foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
I have a number of coworkers who have started in doing QA or doing contract work, and they have graduated, as it were, to full time with the very company that they were contracted to. That is, and they have a great advantage, particularly from the computer side, because they know where the bodies are buried. They have laid out those bugs in the first place and dealt with them. So they have that connectivity with just about everybody to be able to say, okay, I need to solve this. I need to go over and talk to him, and that's makes them a very valuable trait. I've worked with a lot of contractors over the years, contract employees, and I think the world of them. And our QA teams have always been excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was 2 years as a contractor, and then I was hired on, and I stayed for another 2 years, still in customer service. But at the time, there was so many layoffs going on, and I had a family to support. I'm actually one of the few people who showed themselves out the door from WotC, just because it was literally starting to affect my health. Just the uncertainty of working there. But I mean, it was good because it kind of gave me a boost into the industry, and I've been able to stay busy for the last 20 years.
And the great thing is, right now, Wizards' health is very, very good. I mean, they have been very successful over the last 5 years, and this is just, I really have to say, having gone through periodic layoffs, having been laid off an occasion on myself, it's just seeing how they've developed and built a lot of stability it's really kind of nice.
Yeah, maybe it's time for me to approach them again and see about doing some more freelancing. The last thing I did for them was Mysteries of the Moon Sea.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
It's been a bit. So
they're still on the list of one of the few places I haven't worked for. Like, I don't know why I've never. I mean, I've done Paizo, I've done Money Pit Games, I've done White Wolf via Sword and Sorcery Studios. I've worked for lots of folks, but for whatever reason, I've never been able to crack to get into the WotC nut.
I've tagged a lot of people over the years as well. The group I've never worked for is Games Workshop.
So the big one for me, for you, and oddly enough, Doug Niles, was for both of you. It was Forgotten Realms novels, Top Secret, and the big one for me, that was that, because for a while it would be D&D was a given, but for me, Spelljammer, Marvel Superheroes, and Top Secret were my big route into your name, and then also into Doug's.
Well, Top Secret, was that Top Secret or Top Secret SI?
SI for freelance. Freelance specifically.
Yeah, that's good, because Merle Rasmussen did the original Top Secret. Now he's come back and he's doing the latest incarnation of Top Secret.
Just over on that shelf next to all my original Top Secret stuff. Yeah, all the chits and all the cutout cards and all that. I think the only thing I've lost over the years, I think out of the few, they don't have a lot of gaming losses. I got really lucky. Like, as we all grow up, stuff just goes poof, you lose stuff. My only big parental loss moment was my G.I. Joe toys, but it wasn't necessarily my mom's fault. But
I gave
my
mine away.
Stuff, mine were still in a truck in her house until a flood in the basement. Basically, black molded the heck out of the whole box. And it's like, nope.
Natural disasters take a lot of people down. So.
Never put your valuable stuff in a basement. Just don't do it.
Yeah. But most of my game books are survived. I think one of the few tragedies in the early years, though, because I started gaming when I was 6. So one of my early tragedies, I think, was my original Marvel superhero stuff. Just kind of slowly kept losing pieces till it was down to just the Fazrip books, and that was it.
Well, my original, when I started playing, it was with the wood grain box D&D. And over time, I've lost covers. I've lost the extra sheets that came in it. The box itself was flattened. It basically lost all. Okay, so I'm seeing the people with all the collector's editions, and I'm saying, yeah, that's nice. Mine went away by use.
Yeah,
a friend of mine at a garage sale found it was a wood grain box of the original, but it was like a 4th printing or a 5th printing, so a 77 printing. So. And he got it for like $10.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, and I like look at him and go, you do know what you got? And he's like, well, it looked cool. And I'm like, it's about $400.
Yeah, these days the collectible values are just stupid.
Yeah, people know that. People are just out there scanning stuff to be able to. I've attended. We have antiquarian book sales in Seattle, and I've attended a few of them. And there are people who are browsing and looking for something, and there's the guy with the scanner who's just basically going through everything and seeing what he can get for it. So this happens online a lot too. So
like state sales too.
And every so often somebody pops in. I've got this, first edition Empire of the Petal Throne. Is that useful?
I've never actually seen that one. Heard a lot about it. Never actually seen it.
It's one of those legendary. When it came out, I did buy it because it was like a $30 product. And who's going to spend $30 for a role playing game when you can get D&D for $10 in a little box, and the extra and Greyhawk's $5, So and that was one of those few things I did regret about not. I have a copy now. I have a copy of War of the Wizards, which is actually the board game. Early on, there was plans to basically do a lot more EPT than there was, and they pulled back from that. So there was a lot of initial stuff that was pretty cool. But it's a very good setting, and I strongly recommend people search it out as far as seeing and just marvel at the fact that this was 76, 77. I mean, this was the dawn of role playing. Mm-hmm. And this particular product came out, and it was not Western fantasy, and it was had a lot of strange spellings and strange monsters and stuff that no one had seen before, and it was pretty darn impressive at that age. I mean, we didn't catch up until Forgotten Realms and Spelljammer and all that.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking of settings, you worked on a lot of them.
Yes.
I know this is kind of like asking you, hey, what's your favorite kid? But do you have a favorite setting that you've worked on?
What day is it? Because it does shift. I mean, it's just like, and for different reasons. I loved, Dragonlance for the story. I always, actually, the strong memories I have with it are usually involving the people I worked with. Okay, back when Dragonlance was Dragon Lunch, and we would go out for lunch with Tracy, and we would hash things out, and the Forgotten Realms, getting these huge packages of manuscripts wrapped in plastic, Canadian plastic, the type of plastic you use to insulate your windows, and they were so ornately wrapped it would take me 5-10 minutes just to unwrap the package. This is in those early ages where sending things over the internet was chancy, so it was mailed, and we finally gave him a Federal Express number, and it was FedExed from Canada, and sometimes it would show up, sometimes it wouldn't, but that was just wonderful stuff. And Spelljammer, working, Jim Ward was our boss at the time, and Warren Spector was there. So a lot of my memories about these worlds involve the people I worked with, and the type of work we were doing, because every project was different and unique in its own way. It had a lot of challenges, but they were unique challenges for how we were going to address this. So, favorite? I'm always partial to the Realms.
Okay.
I've always loved Marvel superheroes. I'm very proud of the fact that Steve Winter and I put that together. It was because of the license. We had to work very quickly, so I did game design, and he did the whole face front true believer language in there, and he was just brilliant. And later on, we got to deal with a more traditional with the advanced set, where I did full design, and then again he translated me into English. So.
Now, I got to say, my favorite edition of Forgotten Realms is actually the second edition. The big box set.
Which was gold, and then was that blue painting? Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I like that one because it included a little bit more than the gray box. A little more content.
Yes, it did.
Kind of let the seams out a little bit. A little bit of editorial commentary throughout that was kind of fun to read.
Karen Boomgarden was the editor on the first one. Julia Martin was the editor on the second. Behind the scenes, gossip type of thing. The original one was a gold box, with that gold cover with the cutout of the and we had like art directors at the time, and the art directors told us that it was a prototype. We made that as a prototype. We put in the catalog, show at Toy Fair, but we weren't planning that to be the final. But the art director came to us and said, the boss, Lorraine, really likes that. And we looked at each other and said, oh, okay, if she liked it, we're going to do it. What we didn't know is the art director went to Lorraine and said, the designers, they really like this cover. So the art director was playing both sides against the middle, and that's how we ended up with the goal. And when we found out, that's how we eventually changed the cover, saying, okay, it's time to,
So did the art director just not want to commission something new for it, or what?
I don't know if it was I do not know the thinking there. But the fact is, we have to generate a lot of covers. If you go back and look at the catalogs that we had from the 80s and early 90s, you'd see that the covers would pretty much agree for January, February, March, and then as you got further out, they got murkier and murkier as far as taking a sketch that the artist had put together. Yeah, we think we might want to do this, and then basically colorizing it sometimes, very loosely, and basically making sure we had something to show.
I remember the first picture of Dragon Bait that I saw was a bit different than what showed up on Azure Bonds.
Yeah, we did, but that was actually pretty much because that was like a February, March release, so that was pretty close. We had an initial art piece by Clyde Caldwell that basically had a Dragon Bait, slightly different outfit. We had the Azure Bonds along the side where the tower appears, and they weren't too sure about that. Tattoos and basically the mystic symbols, so we replaced it with a tower. And Alias had these huge hoop earrings. These big hoop earrings. And I brought this sketch home and I showed it to my wife. And I said, so what do you think about this? And she looked at it. She said, I hate the earrings. And I said, the earrings. Okay. The armor doesn't bother you. Yeah, no. The earrings, they're what we, what really, I can't see a warrior having those earrings. So we got rid of the earrings and that's part of the evolution of, how a project comes together.
Azure Bonds was part of what converted me to the Forgotten Realms, because by that point for me, that was the third setting, because they started with Greyhawk and playing in Karamikos a lot, so Known World and Greyhawk. And then suddenly one day, like my gaming group I was with is like all about Forgotten Realms. I'm like, what? So I went to a Walden book and I grabbed Dark Walker of Moonshade,
right, which was the first novel.
Azure Bonds. So I grabbed Douglas's book and your guys' book, and that's what got me looking at Forgotten Realms and going, okay, I can play here.
So here's an interesting story about Dark Walker. It was written for a different campaign.
Really?
There was a plan afoot to do a British Dragonlance. In other words, to do Dragonlance, but with a British group. And plans were made. Doug was going to do the novel, and suddenly we decided we're no longer going to do creative work out of England. It got closed down. Doug's here with half a written novel. And we went to him and said, well, the realms is supposed to take things. So, do you think your novel can fit in? And we redrew the Moonshae Isles, which was more of a Earth's, and Ed mentions this all the time, an Earthsea archipelago. Basically it had a little more scattered isles, and he had this large British-looking island. And, that's how Darkwalker ended up in the realms. We brought in some different gods. We made some adjustments for it, and it worked. And that was one of the things about the realms. The realms was going to be a world where you could throw just about anything you want in it. I had a boss one time stops by the office, my cube, puts his hand up on the edge, wants to talk about TPS reports. It says, you know what the realms needs? The realms needs Zeppelins. And I said, Zeppelins. He says, yes, Zeppelins. He says, see if you can put Zeppelins in the realms. And I go, okay. And I call Ed. And Ed's a librarian up in Canada, in Ontario. And, basically they answer the phone. So, oh, yeah. And I hear in the background, it's him again, and they, and he gets on. And I say, okay, you're not going to believe this, but my boss wants Zeppelins in the realms. And Ed responds, oh, you must mean the skyships of Halrua, which I described in Dragon Magazine number 47, And it's just, okay. Went down to my boss and said, for you, we can get Zeppelins. So.
I remember those things just because, what was it? They were limited to Halrua.
They limited.
Go, yeah.
But we busted them out later for the comic book.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I'm an airship junkie. Anytime airships show up anywhere, in my current campaign, my DM shoehorned in an airship because he's like, fine, I'm going to let you have an airship. Mm-hmm. So now I have an airship and I've done horrible things with it. So I'm beyond happy. It even has cannons.
I've got a weak spot for airships as well. So
I think that's also why I like Spelljammer so much. It's just ships.
Yeah, let's talk about Spelljammer. That was
sure.
It was so different. The closest thing prior to Spelljammer might have been Manual of the Plains.
I've got a type now, yeah.
No, I loved it. It was off the wall. It was like the first D&D thing I had seen that wasn't trying to be medieval Europe in some way. And we ended up spending this is the first long-term campaign I ever ran back in high school, and we ended up spending about 2 years doing Spelljammer. Absolutely loved it. But so how did this come about? How did you take the leap from Forgotten Realms and kind of European-based fantasy to Wahoo in space?
We literally, this is a bar story. Jim Ward, our boss at the time, basically took it. We said, take the afternoon off. We're going to go to this local bar, and we're going to talk about big box sets we want to do for next year.
I'm going to ask you pause for just a second. Rod Weibel just said drugs, lots of drugs. In the chat. Okay.
Oddly enough, despite Manual of the Plains, that would be untrue. But I will not argue that it sometimes creates that impression for people.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead and continue your story.
Okay.
I decided to throw that in.
Anyway, we went to I think it was called Augie's, which was a bar in Lake Geneva, a bar restaurant, and we sat around. We started throwing ideas back and forth and cogitating, and again, the waitstaff, we learned later, thought that we were movie people because we were talking about so much weird stuff, and they were talking about filming something at the nearby Yerkes observatory, and that Warren Spector, who was there in his vest, was Steven Spielberg. And so because he was really running things, but it was Jim in charge. And among the things as I pitched an image, and the image was a fighter in armor standing on the deck of a ship in space. And the fighter can breathe, and the fighter does not float away, and the ship basically functions like a ship. And Jim thought that was a marvelous idea, and that's where Spelljammer got its start. And at that time, we had a format for those 1-inch deep boxes that we would have 24 cards and a 96-page book and a 64-page book, and we could fill it easily with the stuff that we were coming up with. And what I was doing is doing a lot of synthesis work, working with a lot of other people as far as what are we going to throw in, how's it going to happen, and particularly with the artists. Jim Holloway did the interior ships, and what he would do is I'd give him a general approach. I want this ship to look like a hammerhead shark. I want this ship to look like a Nautilus. I want this ship to, and he would bring stuff in, and we would look over it, and I say, this is good, this is bad. What I learned is I had to get the art piece out of his hands before I made any comments. Because at one point I said, okay, this one doesn't quite work because of this, this, and this. And I turn my back and I hear this ripping noise as he tears it up because he's not happy with it. So I basically made sure that I would basically have my hands on it before making any comments. And Jim, one thing, the reason there are so many Beholder ships is Jim gave us like 5 designs. And I said, okay, we're going to use all of them. And what we did after that initial design stage is we turned to Dave LaForce, Diesel, who is a very, excellent map maker, among other things. And he basically would scan out, okay, what would the interior of this Nautilus look like? And we would basically, argue about decks and gravity planes and the pseudoscience involved. And it really worked out well. And I think that's one reason the ships are the coolest thing about Spelljammer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's something about the idea, like for me, one of my favorite of all time is, as quote unquote a bad guy ship, Yogi Death Spiders.
Yes,
like just the idea of suddenly, I'm pretty sure it's why I liked the Shadows as bad guys in Babylon 5 was just suddenly something coming out of nothingness, and it looks like a giant spider coming at. Like, yeah, there's some little human element in the back of your monkey brain that just triggers it as 8-legged things dropping out of the sky in your face. Like, nope. That's
also. The Yogi were original for it, and I was really looking for, bad guys to keep them as bad as possible, because as we create creatures and as we work with them, we'll get more depth, we'll get more understanding, we'll get more humanization. Strahd, Yeah. I mean, it's an excellent character, but, basically moved vampires as far as how we would treat them. And, we had mind flayers that operate that. And I'll be honest, I holder bartender on the Rock of Brawl, so I'm guilty of this as anything. But the Neogi were supposed to be repulsive and evil, and they kept Umber Hulks as slaves, and they're just, and that was the whole point of getting. And they have a ship that matches that level of evil.
Yeah,
and I don't think we've done much humanization of the Neogi since then, which is good.
We haven't really seen them since then, have we?
I think they were in 3rd edition. Yeah. Every so often in 5th edition, they do a Spelljammer-ish reference, like a GIF. Mm-hmm. And all the Spelljammer fans goes, they're going to do Spelljammer, and I think they're just winding them up. They're just giggling when they put that in. So, the Modrons are back, which makes me happy.
That's cool.
It is nice with those.
They went away on 4th edition.
Well, they're getting closer for a few things. I think, I don't know. I play a lot of 5e, and so when I'm watching what they're doing and seeing how they do stuff, I keep seeing enough stuff. It's like, well, it's either going to be Spelljammer or any one of these 3 things that have certain elements. Like when they dropped Eberron, I'm like, see? And they're like, what's the difference? I'm like, they both have never mind.
They have airships.
They both have ships that fly. Like, the longest time, people just thought Spelljammers were airships because they were just flying around Forgotten Realms. No one realized, no, they just kept going up. Like, they just...
and you saw the trailer for the latest Baldur's Gate.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Was a
and, one of my coworkers, the computer game company I'm working for basically came in and said, they got mind flayers and nautiloids, and I'm looking at it, and that's really cool. And it's nice seeing stuff that you help develop basically evolving and becoming part of it. And I think that's one of the really nice things. I always say that game design is a conversation. And, you're going to lay something out, and then someone's going to say, that's real nice, but this is what you should do with it. And they carry it forward. And then someone says, okay, that won't work. And we go forward with that. And so, well, that piece doesn't function well. So here's what we do over here. And that conversation, I think, is part of what really powers a lot of game design. I mean, you can always look at influences and things that are, that we come out of the past and stuff that influences us. And that's one of the really joys of the entire system.
I like one of my favorite things, I've been freelancing off and on since 2000, and what really gave me the hook, what really gave me the juice off of it was the very first thing I ever did that got bought was for Sword and Sorcery Studios for Relics and Rituals. It was an artifact called the Tear of Mormo. I submitted 9 other things. I technically cheated my way into it because we play tested 3rd edition, but the only thing that got picked was an artifact, the Tear of Mormo, which was basically a dagger made of the tooth of one of the Titans, right?
Right.
And it was I guess it was so evocative. They liked it so much. You got a half-page piece of art with a human character slowly being evolved into a rat folk, holding this dagger with a whole bunch of rat folk cultists around it, following him and worshiping him. And it's still, to this day, it's one of my favorite things because I didn't tell anyone to draw this picture. Nothing in my description says this picture. You can just see what the thing is having this kind of moment. And one of my best favorite thing, anytime I get art out of something I wrote or whatever, and then I see the art, that's always one of the biggest pains. The money's okay, but the art is just phenomenal.
Definitely got to agree there. Are you playing D&D these days?
Yes, I've got 2 campaigns that I'm involved in. One is the Monday night campaign, which isn't being held tonight, is run by Steve Winter. And we are going through Caverns of Archaea, which is, basically this big super complex of, fighting in the Grand Canyon with all sorts of, different entrances and crypts and lairs and etc. And, we're doing it on Roll20, which is real nice because we can run for a couple hours and literally stop in the middle of combat, leave everything set up and come back. Because as older folk, we tend to turn in earlier now.
Yeah.
So this is just that's one of them. The other has been a rotating campaign, which has been Call of Cthulhu, but is not right now on Saturday nights. And we have a regular bunch of people who all tune in. Right now, we're doing Janelle Jacquet's Dark Tower. Right now, the old classic. And so we've been we're playing 5th edition on Monday nights, and we're playing 1st edition on Saturday.
So that's going to be one of my questions. Actually, is what edition are you playing?
Yes, I do like all of our editions because I played all of those editions, and I've had thank yous and full credits and all the rest of them as we go along. But I can see how much the editions change, and this is part of that whole evolution of gaming, which I hope keeps on going. I don't think we found the answers quite yet. So,
I don't know. I'm kind of one of those people who feels like the more that people have tried to fix it, the farther it's gotten away from the original fun. Which is why I really kind of like the 1st edition play style, and I still run 5th edition. I'm not dissing any of the editions myself.
No,
but classic play
is
fun.
When I was actually playing in North Texas RPG Con, I have a set of 1st edition modules that I had written for the RPGA. And I would come and I would run them. And, at one point we had a young man there, I don't know, 16, 17. And he was the magic user. And he was looking up the spells, that he had. He had Cloud Kill and all of this. And he got to double down. He closed the book and he said, 1st edition is weird. Oh, really? Why? I'm looking at this Cloud Kill spell, and it says it can be used. It's heavier than air, so it can be used to clear out ant nests. What situation happened in a game that they said this is important enough to put in the spell description? I say, yeah, that's the nature of, as the game evolved, they would find out particular situations and it would become part of the design. It would become part of the discussion. And I think that's, again, one of the gems of, I love first edition. I love fifth edition. I love fourth edition too, which is a terrible thing to admit nowadays, but they were designed for different reasons. And everyone was designed in part to address challenges we had with the previous edition.
And that makes sense.
I think and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
I think would be the reason so I tend to almost always like newer editions, but I think that's because most of my group dynamics are almost always in newer editions. Like I have some friends will talk about, they've been gaming with the same people 30 years. And I almost look at them with jealousy because part of the stuff of how I grew up is I moved around a bit. And so I would have this group of friends playing these games here at this time. Then I would move and then everything would start over and there'd be a new build, a new this, a new that.
But the online capacity now, with video calls and with Discord and with Roll20 and then the new apps allows to break that down. And while during COVID we haven't been able to meet in person, most of my regular D&D group can get together. And yes, we are a lot of older folk who have been together. Old WotCites, old TSRites, along with some new people, a lot who have fallen into our orbit and have joined up the team. So it's been kind of nice. I think the newer editions newest edition lends itself very nicely to what they have with this Vox Machina, with these demonstrating the game online, which is kind of cool because the best way to learn D&D is to sit down and play it, which isn't something everybody has when they're standing in the Barnes and Nobles waiting for, seeing, do I want to buy this? So seeing the demonstrations, seeing Matt Mercer and everybody basically coming in and, and creating is, I think, a wonderful promotion. And one of the things that I think has, encouraged the success of 5th edition and affected its design as well.
Yeah, actual players are doing a really good job as ambassadors by giving people that initial, that first rush, that first touch. My partner, we met through a friend of mine's campaign, and the whole reason she was interested in starting to play is she had been watching that or watching Critical Role and listening to the Adventure Zone, and those two evocative styles of plays and groups and the way they present themselves made her think, I'd love to try this game. And then she joined my friend's game, and I joined my friend's game, and we met through there a few years ago.
And that's how we evolve, and that's how we change, and that's how we keep the game fresh to a great degree.
That's the other big thing too. Is I think if we would have had, for all of its horribleness at times, I sometimes think that certain friendships that I lost back in, even just go not that far back, just go back to the 90s. I think if we would have had social media then, some of those friends would still be friends today.
Yes.
And there's always the opportunity to sometimes run into them and grab them and bring them forward. But
I still encounter some old friends from college on Facebook. So.
Oh, yeah. Occasionally. Not as often. I mean, I don't know. Seems like the college for me, it's like a lot of these people, I kind of lived in the dorms with them and then they kind of fell away, and I really... they don't have kind of the staying power that my high school friends had. But
for the people I was in the dorm with, you're right. For the people I attended engineering classes, you're correct. For the people I played D&D with, not so. I'm still talking to some of them. So,
and I will say, I do make it sound like I have this fondness for keeping in contact with people, but I should fully admit to everybody before I get called out on it by certain people that know me, I am a giant misanthrope. I live in my hometown currently, and I have still yet to attend a high school reunion because it's too out of my way.
Okay.
Two of my psychology professors jokingly called me an affable misanthrope because they can tell I actually enjoy bucking certain trends or not doing things because it's expected of me. But at the same time, gaming, my big exception to the whole thing has always been gaming and friends, because I'd say 99% of the people that I enjoy being around and spending time with, regardless of system, regardless of publisher, all of them have been through gaming. There's been a handful I picked up through workplaces and stuff, But gaming's usually, for me, always been the great unifier because it's sharing a hobby in creative time.
I always claim that, basically I'm quite happy to, not go out and talk to people. My wife knows this to be a lie because, I harumph and grump and I go off to a convention and have a great time. So.
I really do conventions.
Put you with the right folks and then everything works out. And then, I don't do a lot of conventions.
For every convention I go to, I usually get invited to about 5. And I just don't. I don't know.
I'm not a great convention person. I've been to a few, and they've been really good. But it's been like years since I've gone to a Gen Con, and probably be years again before I go because
I prefer.
I usually go to conventions when I've got an assignment. Basically we've got a new game. We're going to basically present it. We need somebody to demo it. I've done some some work with, basically minding the booth for Wolfgang Bauer and Kobold Publishing when they've been out there, but, not for years now. I'm still doing stuff for Wolf. So, because again, he was a member of the group and he's still every so often I basically, give him an essay or something.
I've done a little bit of work for him. I did 25 monsters for Creature Collection 2.
Ooh, excellent.
And I did some more monsters for, I forget the name of the book now. But yeah,
Tome of Beasts.
No, it wasn't
the new one?
It wasn't a monster book. It was a fae book.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it because I don't want to mess it up because it was one of the first Kickstarters. What was it before Kickstarter? He used to crowdfund a bunch of stuff way back forever ago.
I forgot about that, but.
Oh yeah, I believe that Kobold Publishing got the Diana Jones Award for basically its crowdfunding approach, which was before Kickstarter itself. And for those listening, the Diana Jones Award is a curated award made by a secretive group that basically gets a number of nominees and basically chooses the best influence product person in the gaming industry. And the award consists of a lucite block that has the burn cover of an Indiana Jones game. Basically it was one of the survivors of the fire. And so it says Diana Jones. And so therefore that was legible. So that became the award.
So we're almost out of time here.
Yes. Is there anything from the floor?
Not at the moment. Rod has made a few comments. Basically comes back to the appeal of 1E as having lived through the 70s and the 80s, which I kind of agree with. 70s and the 80s are definitely not what it is today. But I have a question for you. If you were to address somebody who is interested in becoming a game designer, what advice would you have for them?
Flee, you fools. The interesting thing for a game, it's literally design games. Because of Kickstarter, because of online media, because of selling PDFs, it is so much easier to get into game design and being able to establish. It's always had that case, going back to the fanzines and going back to, the people running stuff off of mimeographs. Tracy Hickman got his start designing and selling D&D product, without permission. And someone was, at, a convention and picked it up, a copy of Ravenloft and sent it into our legal department and said, is this, does this violate our trademarks? And they handed it over to Mike Gray, and Mike read it and he said, yeah, it does, and it's pretty darn good. You really should hire this guy. And so they hired Tracy, and part of the hiring was they basically got the stuff that he had done previously, which was like Ravenloft, Hacia, and one of the, I think, Pharaoh. And might be Martech as well, but I don't think it was. But basically, this is the type of thing that there is entry points. And I think that for a while, the demands were of such that it wasn't, it was a little tougher to basically get in. But to become a game designer, design games. And that's a lot of where we started, and it gives you the foundation from which you can, go to people if you want to do that full time. I work for Paizo, I work for WotC, etc. Say, yeah, I've done this, and this is the response, and this is what people did. This is how I got started. I was designing tournament modules for Gen Con, and worked out the from there. So this is not, it's not a very exclusionary type of universe, and that's, I think, a good thing.
So basically what you're saying is do the work. Do the work, have fun with it. Make sure you actually like it, and get noticed.
Because if it gets popular, you're going to be doing a lot of it. Yeah. So,
and if ever there was a moment to try, these are the times to try. Like
that's right.
Like it's never been. I don't want to say easier. It's never been better for someone to decide to try becoming a game designer than right now.
Oh, with the OGL, the popularity, 5e,
can turn into an actual play session, which gains a market. They can turn into a product, or goodness gracious, a video. Basically an anime. I mean, the potential there is just really, really there. And it's not like an ultimate goal. I'm going to go do this, and be on Netflix in 2 months, but it is the potential.
All right, very cool. Well, it is 7:00. We've been on for an hour, and it's about time to call it, but I want to tell you, it's been great having you.
Thank you.
Your work has really been, particularly yours, Spelljammer, Forgotten Realms, all the Forgotten Realms comic books, the novels, really inspired me to want to go in this direction with my life, and having you here is just an honor.
I'm glad to be here, and I wish you the best of luck going forward.
And we might want to have you back at some point.
I've got more stories.
Excellent.
And it was great meeting you. I mean, just like with Darren, you've made some of my favorite things to play in, goof off in, read, and it was just nice meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. We definitely appreciate it, and we're going to go ahead and call that a show. So, see you later.
Take care.